Check out how you can get those solar panels installed at your home or residence by going to onesolarsolution.com. Bringing you the world news coming up next. This is Radio Caravan, the world news read by Shabnam Modgil. President Trump has said this morning he will not participate in the second presidential debate after the commission earlier announced that it will be virtual. Vice President Mike Pence and Democratic challenger Kamala Harris will hit the campaign trail in two battleground states today, the day after a sedate debate marked by disagreements over the administration's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Trading barbs through plexiglass shields, Republican Mike Pence and Democrat Kamala Harris turned the only U.S. vice presidential debate of 2020 yesterday into a dissection of the Trump administration's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, with Kamala Harris labeling it the greatest failure of any presidential administration. Vice President Mike Pence and his Democratic challenger faced off in Salt Lake City last night for the lone 2020 vice presidential debate, and the live 90-minute debate moderated by USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page touched on the coronavirus, the economy, climate change, the Supreme Court, and plenty more. Following the attacks and counterattacks by Kamala Harris and Republican Vice President Mike Pence during the vice presidential debate, the former has been hailed by several people for giving a masterful performance. She has accused President Trump of betraying our friends and embracing dictators as she attacked his unilateral approach to his foreign policy that led to America pulling out of the landmark Iran nuclear deal and making the country less safer. With the election exactly 4 weeks away, Vice President Joe Biden leading President Trump in every national poll, opening up a significant advantage in surveys taken since the first presidential debate, and President Trump's re-election prospects are looking grim. He's trailing former Vice President Joe Biden by a significant margin in a number of recent national polls, including one that showed Biden with a whopping 16-point lead. The president is also behind Biden in a number of crucial battleground states. And we do have vulnerable Republicans increasingly taking careful but clear steps to distance themselves from President Trump, one sign of a new wave of GOP anxiety that the president's crisis-to-crisis re-election bid could bring down Senate candidates across the country. So in key races from Arizona to Texas, Kansas and Maine, Republican senators, long afraid of the president's power to strike back at his critics, are starting to break with the president, particularly over his handling of the pandemic in the final stretch of the election. The coronavirus outbreak has infected 34 White House staffers and other contacts in recent days, according to an internal government memo. And President Trump's doctor announced that lab tests showed the president had detectable levels of coronavirus antibodies less than a week after his diagnosis. Patients are asking to join clinical trials of antibody-based COVID-19 drugs that President Trump was treated last week with, an experimental therapy from Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. And he also promised to make it free to Americans while touting its benefits. He credited this experiment drug treatment with helping his recovery and suggested his diagnosis could be a blessing in disguise in the nation's battle against the pandemic. Wisconsin is now one of the nation's new COVID-19 hotspots with an explosion of new cases, but the response to the pandemic has been stymied by political trench warfare between the Democratic governor and the Republicans who control the state legislature. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's leading infectious disease expert, has now disclosed the grim statistic that as many as 400,000 Americans could die from COVID-19 unless precautions are taken in the fall and winter, gave that chilling warning that the United States death toll could nearly double in the coming months. And the World Bank has said that the coronavirus pandemic could push as many as 150 million people into extreme poverty by the end of next year, 2021. The former Minneapolis police officer charged with murder in the death of George Floyd posted bail yesterday and was released from jail. A Hurricane Hunter aircraft there with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has flown into the eye of Hurricane Delta and told us that it could make landfall, possibly as a Category 3 storm, sometime tomorrow south of Morgan City, Louisiana. The hurricane came ashore in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula yesterday with top winds of 110 miles per hour and has regained strength as it heads towards the United States early this morning. The Justice Department announced charges against 2 British nationals who joined the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria for their role in the torture and brutal killings of Western hostages, including American citizens. And U.S. prosecutors have seized a network of web domains which they said were used in a campaign by Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps to spread political disinformation around the world. Fighting between Armenian and Azerbaijani forces over the disputed region has spilled over this morning with fresh shelling in the province's capital ahead of a first meeting of international mediators in Geneva. The Israeli government has extended an emergency provision that bars public gatherings, including widespread protests against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, for an additional week. And a top UN official condemned recent clashes in Yemen's strategic port city of Hodeidah, which have left dozens killed and wounded, urging the country's warring parties to immediately stop the fighting. European Union government started talks today on a proposed European Commission overhaul of broken migration rules, trying to resolve years of bitter divisions and provide a better welcome for refugees fleeing the Middle East and Africa. The British government is mulling fresh restrictions on everyday life in England amid mounting evidence that the measures so far have done little to keep a lid on new coronavirus infections. Poland's daily coronavirus cases have surged over 40% this morning compared to the previous day, and Austria's daily number of confirmed coronavirus cases has surpassed the record set in March. Novak Djokovic said he was feeling okay after overcoming neck and shoulder troubles to defeat Pablo Carreno Busta and set up a French Open semi-final showdown with Stefanos Tsitsipas. Indonesian police detained nearly 400 protesters, the second day of heated demonstrations over a controversial new labor reform law in Southeast Asia's largest economy. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Radio Caravan. Over 1.1 million Rohingyas continue to remain stranded in crowded camps in Bangladesh, while the international community fails to provide a resolution to that crisis. The indefinite de facto detention of some 130,000 Rohingya Muslims in squalid camps in Myanmar amounts to apartheid, according to Human Rights Watch, urging Aung San Suu Kyi's government to end the abusive treatment of the minority. Authorities in Sri Lanka closed key government offices and further expanded a curfew today to contain a surging coronavirus outbreak. And in a rare act of bipartisanship, Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party and the opposition passed a resolution calling for the Taiwanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs to re-establish formal diplomatic relations with the United States 2.5 weeks after Chinese state media issued a threat against the personal safety of Taiwan's president. China accused by Taiwan of trying to impose censorship in India after its embassy in New Delhi advised journalists to observe the One China principle after newspapers carried advertisements for Taiwan's National Day. The Sunrisers Hyderabad skipper David Warner has won the toss and elected to bat against the Kings 11 Punjab in Dubai this morning. And yesterday, the Chennai Super Kings skipper Mahendra Singh Dhoni said the batsmen let the team down after a spirited comeback by the bowlers in their IPL game against Kolkata Knight Riders in Abu Dhabi. The Indian Air Force celebrating its 88th anniversary today with a grand parade and a scintillating air display at the Hindon Air Base in Ghaziabad. The event was attended by Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat, Army Chief Narvane and Chief of the Naval Staff Admiral Karambir Singh and Indian Air Force Chief Air Chief Marshal RKS Bhaduria inspected the parade, which was followed by a majestic air display. After the World Health Organization, the World Bank has praised the efforts made to control the spread of COVID-19 cases in Dharavi, the country's largest slum with a population of 7 lakhs. And India reported over 78,000 new cases and 971 deaths in the last 24 hours, taking its COVID-19 tally past the 68 lakh mark today. And with over 75,000 people recovering from COVID-19 every day in India, the country's recoveries are 6.3 times more than active cases of coronavirus. 35 states and union territories in the country are performing more than 140 COVID-19 tests per day per million population. And 3 TV channels, including Republic TV, are being probed on charges of TRP manipulation, according to the Mumbai police. India's sulfur dioxide emissions have dropped since last year, and the Delhi Environment Minister inaugurated a green war room at the Delhi Secretariat to monitor pollution levels in the city this winter. Prime Minister Modi assured Afghan peace negotiator Abdullah today of India's continued backing for the peace process in Afghanistan. And Afghan President Ashraf Ghani called on the Taliban to have courage and declare a national ceasefire as he visited Doha, where peace talks between government and Taliban negotiators have stalled. All U.S. troops in Afghanistan should be home by Christmas, said President Trump yesterday, hours after his national security advisor said Washington would reduce its forces in Afghanistan to 2,500 by early next year. And President Trump's former national security advisor has launched a blistering attack on the Trump administration's Afghanistan peace negotiations. The U.S. negotiator seeking to end Afghanistan's war has voiced her hope today that the Kabul government can reach a side deal with Pakistan, whose historic support of Taliban has long tested relations. The Islamabad High Court issued a proclamation against former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in Al Azizia and Avonfield references and directed that it be published in 2 leading newspapers. And the fresh dispute between the PTI government at the centre and the PPP government in Sindh over Islamabad's move to take over twin islands through a presidential ordinance does not seem to be ending anytime soon, as a key member of the federal cabinet accused the provincial administration of playing politics over that issue. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all that I have in the news for you on this 8th of October.